Well, thank you guys for having me on today. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to get to talk to you all about this topic and about how it's really impacted me. I know I first learned about positive psychology and the effect that it can have on your life about, let's see, about 3 years ago. And since then, I can't tell you just how much it's had an impact on me. And I hope it's just as valuable for you. Yeah, so let's get into it here. So how to let happiness drive your success. I'm going to dig in on some concepts around something called positive psychology here for you today. If you're not familiar with positive psychology, what it is a field of study that rather essentially than studying the outliers to the negative, we study the outliers to the positive. Meaning instead of just studying people who have mental health issues, are depressed, have kind of these what we think of as negative mindsets or negative kind of things going on in their brain and bring them up to normal and fix them. Positive psychology says, well, let's look at the people actually who are really happy and let's study happiness. Let's study above average kind of happiness levels and see if we can't learn some lessons from that for everybody else. When I first heard that, that just made a lot of sense to me. And so I think it really starts for me and for most of us with how we view the way happiness works and the order in which happiness works. I think we get taught a lot growing up through the messages we get probably from our culture, from our media, from our environment, that when it comes to success and happiness, happiness is the thing that kind of follows success. That success is the precursor to happiness. Well, once I get that job, then I'll be happy. Once I get that girl or that guy, then I'll be happy. Once I have that kind of house and I have that sort of lifestyle, then I'll be happy. I'll be happy when syndrome. We turn into this kind of constantly chasing some elusive horizon that never comes to us. And it happens a lot because of what we can refer to as the hedonic treadmill. And that treadmill, essentially what it says is that when you do achieve something new, let's say you make a lot more money. John on here was just talking about how he went from making $3,000 or $4,000 a month to 10 or 12 pretty quickly. That's going to have a big impact on his life, and it's going to make a big impact on his happiness. But the thing is, it's not going to be long term. It's going to spike. We adapt pretty quickly. We get pretty used to things being easy, to being, you take someone who's poor and you put them in a luxury hotel and you let them stay there and at a resort. And after, a few months, like they're going to feel just as happy as they were before. You see this with people who win the lottery. They spike in their happiness. They buy a bunch of stuff and then they end up right back where they were. We get on this hedonic treadmill where we see something, we want it, we get it, we feel happy, but then we adapt. And then we got to start the cycle all back over again. And it's just this ongoing treadmill. It's the rat race. This is, I think, why we call it that. And positive psychology says something the opposite. They said, no, that happiness doesn't come after success. It's that actually once you learn to be happy with where you are, you start to see more success. You might not, your level of success might be different than somebody else's, but you will start to have more good things happen in your life when you are happy, because you're going to resonate on a level with good, positive things. And there's a lot of science and studies that really back this up. The other problem here is this idea of enough. You take that person who, you put them in a situation where all of a sudden they have way more than they really need, and they start to overconsume. And they don't have that healthy balance of pleasure and challenge. They just get into pleasure, and you turn yourself into a spoiled brat. You turn yourself into a little baby who can't handle any pain and isn't really happy with anything around them. And so there is a cutoff point at which where money will satisfy those basic needs. And I want to be clear on that if your basic needs are not being satisfied, then yes, having more money will increase your happiness. Once you get above the survival point, above the stress line, that's where we're talking about. A mentor of mine said it the best, I think, that I have ever heard, is he said, money's not everything unless you don't have any. Then it's everything. And so what does actually determine our happiness? And what they found is that genetically, makes up about half half of our happiness. We're kind of predisposed to being either positive or negative based on how our parents were, how our grandparents were. And maybe that makes you feel good. maybe if it's your family, it makes you not feel so good. But what's interesting about this graph to me is that most people think that it's their circumstances that really has the biggest impact on their life, right? If I get X, then I will be happy. If I achieve Y, then I will be happy. But life circumstances only make up about 10% of our happiness. 40% of our happiness is within our control, is within our own attitude, within the habits that we develop, within the ways that we decide to look at things and decide to act upon things. And to me, that's exciting to know that I really have much larger control over my happiness than I thought I did before I started looking into this sort of thing. The other thing is that it can change. We can change. Neuroplasticity has taught us that that our brain has its ability to reorganize itself, to build new neural pathways. And when you think about a pathway, like imagine the woods. Imagine your brain is the woods, right? If there's a connection between point A and point B, that means that there's a trail there. That means that you've walked over that specific line over and over and over again until a trail has formed. And now it's just the path of least resistance. And every time you walk over it, that trail gets clearer and clearer and more strengthened. And if it happens in your brain, that means you're thinking that same way over and over and over again. It becomes easier to think, and you end up thinking more and more about that same thing, be it positive or negative. Most of us, though, have negative defaults. You can build a new positive neural connection, but it takes that same walking over it again and again and again. But what's so cool about this is that the brain can change, and we have the power to change our own brains. The first way we can do that is with optimism. Now, I know that when a few years ago, if you'd asked me about being optimistic, I'd say I'm not optimistic and I'm not pessimistic. I'm realistic. What I really was a pessimist who didn't want to say so. And what I've learned about optimism is that it's not about not wearing your seatbelt because you think that nothing bad can happen to you. It's not about blindly ignoring the things you should be cautious about in life. What it is about having a realistic and response to setbacks where you are still looking for the opportunities, where you are still looking for the things to be grateful for, where you are still looking for the positives, because if you look for them in any situation, you can find them. Optimism. Let's see. In a study of life insurance agents, actually, life insurance agents deal with a lot of rejection, and some of them really have a hard time with it, and others just thrive with it. So they wanted to do a study on this, and they actually did a study of life insurance agents, and they tested for all different kinds of variables for them getting started, their background, their education level, their IQ, their all kinds of stuff. And then they looked at the results and said who was successful and who wasn't. Turns out that more than their experience, more than their education level, more than their IQ, more than who their daddy was, more than anything else, the number one determining factor in their success was their optimism. Because when they would hit setbacks, they would develop resiliency by looking at the situation in a positive light and still recognizing the opportunities that still existed there. There have been studies done where they have shown that people who consider themselves optimistic notice opportunities at a significantly higher rate than people who consider themselves pessimistic. They've done lots of studies where they showed, they gave people a newspaper and told them to read through it and pick out how many times a certain word popped up, and they would get $20 if they got it right. On the second page, though, they put a big block lettering that said, stop the study. If you stop right now and show us this page, you'll get more money. You'll get $40. The people who, before the study, said they were optimistic, they saw the sign at a much higher rate than the people who said they were pessimistic. The people who were pessimistic weren't even looking. They didn't even notice because they were so focused on their specific task that they didn't notice the other opportunity that was sitting right there in front of them. And so optimism, you get what you look for. This is not about expecting good things, but it's about knowing that when the bad things come, you know how you'll respond to them, and you know how you're going to look at them. It's the difference between looking at your problems. An optimist will look at their problems as temporary and specific, meaning this is just for now, and this is just about this thing. Pessimists tend to look at their problems as being permanent and pervasive, meaning this will last forever, and it's about everything all at once. And that's coming from a recovering pessimist. That rings a little too true for me, honestly. It's not about ignoring the doors, but it's just about being open to seeing where the keys lie. And I think Henry Ford maybe said it right when he said, you either think you can, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. The second thing that we want to hit on here is mindfulness. I know it's a buzzword right now. I know that it's a thing that's really becoming very, very popular in the business world. And I know sometimes I know I had a little bit of hesitation towards that because I thought it was a little woo-woo. I thought it was, a little too out there. But it turns out through the study of brain chemistry of what's going on inside of our brains, that those monks and those sages who spent their time sitting under a tree, that there was a lot of truth to what they were saying about happiness and about peace. Mindfulness can include meditation, obviously, but it can also include things like prayer, things like journaling to yourself. What it is the practice of not identifying with every thought and with every emotion you have, but realizing that you can just look at it. You can step back and you can notice that you're having a thought. You can notice that you're having an emotion without tying your identity to it, and by just letting it go and being able to watch the roller coaster of life rather than ride it. Mindfulness promotes well-being. It improves memory. It increases resiliency. It shrinks the stress region in your brain. It increases happiness, your happiness set point, and it connects the left and the right halves of the brain. That practice, when you're doing mindfulness, I've done a lot of meditation and journaling. I've done a lot of these things, and one thing that I find to be really, really fascinating about it is a lot of times people think meditation is about not having thoughts, just sitting still and not thinking anything, and that's impossible. There's no way you can do that. It's like trying to stop your heart from beating. You can't stop your brain from thinking. That's what it's designed to do. But what you can do is, if right now you sit and you breathe and you listen and you feel your heartbeat and you notice your heartbeat, that's something you can do. And it's the same thing, it's just with your mind. It's just about noticing when you're having the thoughts so that you can let them go and realize that you are not your thoughts, and that you are not all of your anxieties, and you are not all of your fears, and you are not all of your doubts. But you are something bigger than that. You are something greater than that. And when you do that in that moment where you notice the thought, you notice the emotion, and you let it go, what happens is it grows gray matter in your brain that connects the left and the right hemispheres of your brain, which are your emotional, artistic, creative thinking or feeling side of your brain in your right brain, and your logical, your rational, your planning, and your time-bound side of your brain, which is your left brain. And when the two of them are actually talking to each other, that's when you can really, really be a full, complete, whole person, because you're not just using half of yourself to do it. You're using your whole self. You're using your whole mind and your whole heart together. The other thing that I want to hit on here that I've learned from positive psychology is that kindness and service to others is actually an avenue for your own happiness as well. Turns out that old adage that your mom probably told you at Christmas time when you had to give your first present to someone else and you were like, how come? I don't want to, was, well, it's better to give than to receive. And I remember when I first heard that when I was 4 or 5, I thought that was bullcrap, but it turns out it's actually very, very true. It turns out that when we give, we receive more than the person who is on the actual receiving end. Acts of kindness, especially random acts of kindness, they decrease stress, they boost happiness, they lower blood pressure, they release feel-good chemicals, they inspire more kindness. And when I say random acts of kindness, I mean abnormal, out of the ordinary. If you normally hold the door for people, then that doesn't count. You got to do something that's different. But when you stretch yourself, you get outside of your own comfort zone and you go and help someone else with something, you feel better on the inside. And it increases your happiness and it increases your optimism as well. The other way that you can think about this, because I know a lot of times I was thinking about, well, what's in it for me? I'm just going to go around helping people all day. And if you want to think about this from a business standpoint, I really love Gary Vaynerchuk's take on it. He talks about adding value to others. And he talks about how relationships are essentially leverage. And so his goal, from what he talks about, is to add so much value to other people first, before you ever ask anything of them. Go add so much value to them that there's no way they can say no when you do need a favor, when you do need something to ask, because you've given them so much that they would want to help you in return. If you give value to someone else first, you have leverage, And the other way that he states that, which I think is beautiful, is that karma is practical. It doesn't have to be some big cosmic spiritual belief. It's just the understanding, it's just common sense that if I do good for everybody else, other people, if I take care of other people, they're going to take care of me too. And so taking care of others and service to others is one of the fastest and quickest ways to boost your own happiness and to boost your own success in business. The last one that I want to really hit on, and this one might be the one that had the biggest impact on me, is gratitude. What this does is having a daily practice of gratitude allows us to really accept the things that we can't control so that we can focus on the things that we actually can. Gratitude increases happiness, mood, satisfaction. It decreases materialism. It decreases burnout. It decreases fatigue. And so actually writing things down, the things that you're grateful for on a daily basis. Pick a number, 3, 5, whatever it might be. 3 is an easy place to start. And for me personally, always found a lot of value in writing down something that I was grateful for, that was a challenge for me, that was actually difficult. Because what that does is that forces your brain to be optimistic. It forces your brain to go through that exercise of finding the good in something, finding the opportunities, finding the positive in things. Because the only meaning in an event is the meaning that we assign to the event. And so you can always look at something positive and you can always look at something negative. And so if you're looking at something negative right now, that practice of finding what you're grateful for in it will help you see the opportunities that are there and actually give you a way forward and a way to move through them. The other half of this that I think is very important and something that I've really had a hard time with and had to get better at in my life is to avoid negative talk. That first comes in the form of negative self-talk, talking badly about yourself to yourself. It secondly comes in the form of complaining about your circumstances to others. And lastly is about gossiping and talking negatively about other people. And that one is toxic. Don't participate in gossip. Do not add to it, because I can guarantee you that your suspicion that your gossip mates are talking about you behind your back is 100% true. Gratitude is the antidote to fear. You can't be grateful and afraid at the same time. You can't be grateful and angry at the same time. Gratitude, I think, is actually the antidote to most of the negative emotions that we feel in life. And so it's a powerful tool. Take advantage of it. Use it each day. And that really gets me to kind of this last point, which brings us back to the beginning about neuroplasticity and about making new connections in the brain. Is that when you go to make a new pathway, you can't just walk a new trail once and expect it to be there. It's something you have to do over and over and over again and repeatedly do. Life is not a place that we arrive at. Happiness is not a place that we arrive at. These are practices. Practice happiness day in and day out. Do not become happy and then expect you will always be happy. Plateaus and these sort of ideas in our minds of of this perfect place that we will find happiness and then we'll just be there forever. That doesn't exist. But if we practice it, it'll be with us every day. If we practice it, we'll get better at it every day. If we practice it, we can become truly, truly happy, because it gets easier and easier the more you practice it. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. And the last thing I'll say to everybody is don't wait. Don't wait to get started on being happy. You have the power within yourself right now to be optimistic about your current situation. You have the power right now to be mindful in your current moment and about your current situation. You have the power to do something nice for someone else right now. And you also have the power to be grateful for your current situation right now in this moment. So if you control all of that, you control your ability to be optimistic, to be grateful, to be mindful, and to do for others, being happy is always within your control. So don't wait. Get started right now. How wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world. I love Anne Frank. I love that journal. And if you haven't read it since you're a kid, I would recommend picking it up again. There's a lot in there, and I know sometimes it's easy for a lot of these things to seem trite and to seem cliche, but the reality is that when something is cliche, that doesn't mean it's not profound. That just means that the profundity is in the application. It means that the idea doesn't matter. The execution is everything. So let's start executing happiness. Let's start it first within ourselves, and let's spread it to others by just adding as much value to as many other people as we can today. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate your time, and have a great rest of your day, and have a good weekend.